Picture this. You're about to post something on social media, but you hesitate. You delete it, rewrite it, delete it again. You spend 20 minutes crafting the perfect caption, choosing the right filter, timing the post for maximum engagement. Why? Because somewhere in your mind, you're terrified of what people might think. You're trapped in an invisible prison, and the guards are the imaginary judgments of others. This is not living. This is performing. And if you're tired of this exhausting performance, if you're ready to break free from the tyranny of other people's opinions, then today we're going to explore one of the most liberating concepts in all of philosophy, the Stoic method of becoming truly free from external judgment. The ancient Stoics understood something that most people today have forgotten, that the opinion of others is not just irrelevant to your happiness. It's actually one of the greatest sources of human misery. And they developed practical, proven methods to free yourself from this mental slavery once and for all. Let me tell you about Epictetus. He was born a slave in the Roman Empire. Imagine that for a moment. He owned nothing, not even his own body. He was literally the property of another human being. And yet, Epictetus became one of the freest men who ever lived. How? Because he understood that while others could control his body, they could never control his mind, his thoughts, his judgment of himself. Epictetus said something that should be written in gold letters and hung in every school, every office, every home. What troubles men is not things, but the judgments they make of things. Think about that. Your suffering doesn't come from what people actually do or say about you. It comes from your judgment about their judgment. It's your thoughts about their thoughts that torment you. And here's the kicker. Most of the time, they're not even thinking about you at all. But let's start from the beginning. Why do we care so much about what others think? Why does the mere possibility of disapproval send us into panic mode? The answer lies deep in our evolutionary psychology, but understanding it is the first step to transcending it. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in small tribes. Being rejected by the tribe meant death. If the group didn't accept you, you were cast out into the wilderness where you would starve, freeze, or be eaten by predators. So our brains evolved an extremely sensitive social radar. We became hypervigilant to signs of disapproval, rejection, or social threat. This was adaptive when we lived in groups of 30 people. But now we live in a world where we're exposed to the potential judgment of millions. Our Stone Age brains are trying to navigate a digital age social environment, and they're completely overwhelmed. Every time you post something online, your unconscious mind treats it like you're standing before the entire tribe, risking banishment and death. But here's what the Stoics understood. That ancient programming is not only outdated, it's actively harmful to your flourishing as a human being. The fear of judgment keeps you small, keeps you conforming, keeps you from expressing your authentic self and pursuing your true goals. Marcus Aurelius, who was literally the most powerful man in the world as Roman emperor, wrote in his private journal, "Remember that very little disturbs the happy progress of your life except your own thoughts about things that are indifferent." Even as emperor, he had to remind himself not to be disturbed by what others thought of his decisions. The Stoics had a radical insight. They realized that other people's opinions about you are not facts about you. They're facts about them. When someone judges you, they're telling you about their values, their fears, their insecurities, their limited perspective. They're not revealing some objective truth about your worth or character. Think about it this way. If someone who has never met you, who knows nothing about your life, your struggles, your intentions, your efforts, forms an opinion about you based on a single interaction or piece of information, how much weight should that opinion carry? The answer is none. Zero. It should carry exactly as much weight as the opinion of a stranger about the color of your thoughts. But we give these random judgments enormous power over our emotional state, our decisions, our entire sense of self-worth. We let the casual comments of people who barely know us determine whether we feel good or bad about ourselves. This is insanity, and the Stoics knew it. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. The blow which has long been expected falls less heavily. Therefore, let not your mind be crushed beneath a sudden impulse. Long before the trouble comes, let it pass before your eyes, and consider it as already come." But he wasn't just talking about external disasters. He was talking about the disaster of living your life according to other people's standards instead of your own. The disaster of never knowing who you really are because you're too busy being who you think others want you to be. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to really think about this. Can you remember a time when you changed your behavior, your appearance, your words, or your goals because you were worried about what someone else might think? Of course you can. We all can. But here's the follow-up question. Did that person's opinion actually matter? Did changing yourself to please them make your life better? Most of the time, the answer is no. Most of the time, you sacrifice something authentic about yourself to appease someone whose opinion turned out to be irrelevant to your happiness or success. The Stoics would say, this is because you misunderstood what was up to you and what was not up to you. This is the foundational concept of Stoic philosophy. The dichotomy of control. There are things that are within your control and things that are outside your control. And wisdom lies in focusing all your energy on what you can control while becoming indifferent to what you cannot. Other people's thoughts about you are completely outside your control. You cannot control what they think, feel, or say about you. You can influence it, sure, but you cannot control it. Even if you live a perfect life, someone will find fault with you. Even if you're kind to everyone, someone will call you weak. Even if you're successful, someone will say you're lucky or privileged. But here's what is up to you. Your character, your effort, your choices, your response to their judgments. These are your domain, your kingdom, the only realm where you have sovereignty. And the moment you start trying to control what's outside your control, you lose control of what actually is within your power. This is why people pleasers are often the most anxious, most miserable people. They're trying to do the impossible, control other people's thoughts and feelings. It's like trying to control the weather by checking the forecast obsessively. The more attention you pay to it, the more powerless you feel. Epictetus had a student who was worried about what people would think if he started studying philosophy seriously. The student said something like, "But master, what if people think I'm strange for spending so much time on philosophical questions?" And Epictetus replied with characteristic bluntness, "If they think you're strange for pursuing wisdom, what does that say about them?" This is the Stoic reframe. Instead of asking, "What will they think of me?" ask, "What does their judgment reveal about them?" When someone mocks you for reading books, what does that tell you about their relationship to learning? When someone criticizes you for being ambitious, what does that reveal about their own relationship to achievement? When someone judges you for being different, what does that say about their tolerance for diversity? Most judgment comes from fear, insecurity, or ignorance. People judge what they don't understand, what threatens their worldview, or what reminds them of their own limitations. Understanding this doesn't make you arrogant or dismissive of others. It makes you compassionate toward their limitations, while protecting yourself from their projections. But let's go deeper, because even understanding all this intellectually, you might still feel that knot in your stomach when someone disapproves of you. You might still hesitate before speaking your mind or pursuing your goals. Why? Because intellectual understanding isn't enough. You need to retrain your emotional responses, and that requires practice. The Stoics were intensely practical. They didn't just theorize about freedom from judgment. They developed specific exercises to cultivate it. One of the most powerful is what I call the death meditation. Those Stoics simply called it remembering mortality. Here's how it works. Whenever you're worried about what someone thinks of you, imagine yourself on your deathbed. Seriously, picture yourself in your final moments, looking back on your life. From that perspective, how much does their opinion matter? When you're facing the ultimate reality of your existence, does it matter that someone thought your haircut was weird, or that they disagreed with your political views, or that they thought you were too ambitious or not ambitious enough? From the perspective of death, all human judgment becomes absurdly trivial. You realize that you wasted precious time and energy worrying about the fleeting thoughts of people who themselves will be dead in a few decades. You see clearly that the only opinions that matter are those of people who truly know you and genuinely care about your well-being. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. He would remind himself, "Remember how brief life is, how vast the universe. What does it matter if someone speaks ill of you? In a short time, both you and the one speaking will be dead, and even your names will be forgotten." This isn't morbid. It's liberating. Death is the great equalizer, the ultimate perspective giver. When you truly internalize the temporary nature of all human existence, including your own, you stop taking the opinions of mortals so seriously. But there's another dimension to this. The Stoics believed in what they called the view from above, imagining yourself from the perspective of the cosmos. Picture the Earth from space, a tiny blue dot floating in an infinite void. Zoom into your continent, your country, your city, your neighborhood. Find yourself in that vast expanse. From this cosmic perspective, your daily concerns about social approval seem almost comically small. The person whose opinion you're so worried about is a tiny speck on a tiny planet in a vast universe. Their judgment of you has no more cosmic significance than the opinion of an ant about another ant. This isn't meant to make you feel insignificant. It's meant to help you recognize what truly matters and what doesn't. Your character matters. Your choices matter. Your impact on the people you love matters. But the casual judgments of casual acquaintances, they're cosmic dust. Seneca had a beautiful way of putting this. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. The end of your attachment to others' opinions is the beginning of your authentic life. The death of your people-pleasing self is the birth of your true self. But let's address the elephant in the room. You might be thinking, this all sounds nice in theory, but I live in the real world. I need other people's approval to succeed. I need my boss to like me, my colleagues to respect me, my clients to trust me. I can't just ignore everyone's opinion. This is a crucial point, and it's where many people misunderstand Stoicism. The Stoics weren't advocating for becoming a hermit or being deliberately offensive. They understood that humans are social creatures and that cooperation requires some level of social awareness. The key distinction is between being aware of others' opinions and being enslaved by them. It's the difference between considering feedback and being controlled by the fear of disapproval. A Stoic leader listens to input from their team not because they're desperate for approval, but because diverse perspectives lead to better decisions. Epictetus made this distinction clear. Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. First, you establish your identity, your values, your goals based on your own reasoning and conscience. Then, you consider how to present yourself effectively in different social contexts. But the presentation never changes the core identity. Think of it like this. An actor puts on different costumes for different roles, but they never forget who they are underneath the costume. Similarly, you might adjust your communication style for different audiences, but you never compromise your fundamental values or authentic self to win approval. This is actually more effective than people-pleasing in the long run. People respect authenticity even when they disagree with you. They can sense when someone is being genuine, versus when someone is desperately trying to be liked. Paradoxically, the less you need their approval, the more likely you are to earn their respect. Marcus Aurelius understood this as emperor. He wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." He knew that constantly monitoring others' reactions to his decisions would paralyze him as a leader. Instead, he focused on making decisions based on his principles and accepting whatever reactions followed. But what about criticism? Surely some feedback is valuable, right? Absolutely. The Stoics weren't against learning from others. They were against being emotionally destabilized by others' opinions. There's a huge difference between receiving criticism thoughtfully and being devastated by disapproval. Here's the Stoic approach to criticism. First, consider the source. Is this person qualified to judge this particular aspect of your life? Do they have expertise in this area? Do they know you well enough to offer meaningful insight? Are they offering this feedback with good intentions? If the answer to these questions is yes, then listen carefully and extract any useful information. Thank them for their input and implement what makes sense. If the answer is no, then you can acknowledge their perspective politely while internally recognizing that their opinion carries no weight. Seneca was brilliant at this. He wrote, "Listen to all, plucking a feather here and there, but do not allow anyone to set your course. Take useful information from wherever you can find it, but never let anyone else become the navigator of your life." The real issue isn't criticism itself. It's the emotional charge we give to criticism. When someone points out a genuine flaw or mistake, a Stoic says, "Thank you for helping me improve." When someone offers unfair or ignorant criticism, a Stoic says, "That tells me more about you than about me." In both cases, there's no emotional upheaval, no loss of sleep, no rumination or revenge fantasies. The criticism is processed rationally, and then life continues. This is what the Stoics called preferred indifference. Things that might be slightly better or worse to have, but that don't fundamentally affect your well-being or worth. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Cato the Younger, one of the most respected Stoic philosophers, was known for his uncompromising integrity. He refused to participate in the corruption that was common in Roman politics, even when it meant losing influence and making enemies. One day, someone spat in his face in public, a deliberate insult meant to humiliate him. Do you know what Cato did? He calmly wiped his face and said, "I will swear to anyone that people are wrong to say that you cannot use your mouth." He turned an attempt at humiliation into a witty observation about his attacker's behavior. Cato didn't get angry, didn't seek revenge, didn't spend the next week replaying the incident in his mind. He recognized it for what it was, someone else's loss of self-control that said nothing about his own worth. He was free because he was not enslaved by the need to control others' actions or opinions. This is the level of inner freedom that's possible when you truly internalize Stoic principles. You become like a mountain that remains unmoved, whether people praise it for its beauty or curse it for blocking their view. Their opinions don't change the mountain's nature, height, or value. But how do you actually develop this level of equanimity? How do you retrain emotional responses that have been reinforced for decades? The Stoics have specific practices for this, and they work if you're willing to put in the effort. The first practice is what I call judgment archaeology. Whenever you feel upset by someone's opinion of you, you dig deeper to uncover your underlying beliefs. Ask yourself, why does this person's opinion matter to me? What am I afraid will happen if they disapprove of me? What story am I telling myself about what their judgment means? Often you'll discover that your fear isn't really about their opinion itself, but about some catastrophic story you've invented about the consequences. You're afraid that if your boss disapproves of this project, you'll be fired, become unemployable, end up homeless, and die alone. But when you examine this chain of assumptions, you realize how unlikely and irrational it is. The Stoics called these irrational fears false impressions. Your initial impression might be, My boss seems annoyed with me, which could be accurate. But the false impression is, this means I'm about to be fired and my career is over. Learning to separate accurate observations from catastrophic interpretations is essential for emotional freedom. Epictetus taught his students to challenge their impressions by asking, is this judgment necessarily true? Could there be other explanations? What would I tell a friend who was having this same worry? Usually, when you apply the same rational standard to your own fears that you'd apply to a friend's, you realize how overblown they are. The second practice is role rehearsal. This is where you mentally prepare for disapproval before it happens. Before you give a presentation, publish an article, start a business, or make any kind of public statement, you imagine the worst possible reactions and practice your Stoic response. Someone might hate your idea. Someone might call you an idiot. Someone might say you're too young, too old, too inexperienced, or too arrogant. By imagining these reactions in advance and planning your response, you take away their power to surprise and destabilize you. Marcus Aurelius did this constantly. He would remind himself, begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. He wasn't being pessimistic. He was being prepared. By expecting difficult people and unreasonable reactions, he couldn't be thrown off balance when they occurred. This doesn't mean becoming cynical or defensive. It means approaching social interactions with realistic expectations, rather than hoping that everyone will always approve of everything you do. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and you'll be unshakable either way. The third practice is values clarification. You can't be indifferent to others' opinions until you're crystal clear about your own values and principles. If you don't know what you stand for, you'll be blown around by every wind of social pressure. The Stoics spent considerable time defining their core values: wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. These weren't just abstract ideals. They were practical guides for daily decisions. When faced with social pressure, they could ask, does this align with my values or not? If yes, they proceeded regardless of opposition. If no, they refused regardless of popularity. What are your core values? Not what you think they should be, not what others expect them to be, but what they actually are when you're honest with yourself. Is it creativity? Is it family? Is it achievement? Is it service to others? Is it personal freedom? Whatever they are, they should guide your decisions more than social approval. When you're clear about your values, other people's opinions become just data points rather than commands. If someone criticizes you for spending too much time with your family, and family is one of your core values, their criticism is simply irrelevant. They're measuring you by their values, not yours. Seneca put it perfectly. No one can have all he wants, but a man can refrain from wanting what he has not got, and cheerfully make the best of a bird in the hand. You cannot have everyone's approval, but you can refrain from needing it, and cheerfully focus on living according to your own standards. The fourth practice is what I call perspective shifting. This is where you deliberately change your viewpoint to see the situation from different angles. When someone's opinion bothers you, try seeing it from their perspective first. What might be driving their judgment? What fears, insecurities, or past experiences might be coloring their view? Often, when you understand where someone's criticism is coming from, it loses its sting. The colleague who calls you too ambitious might be struggling with their own lack of direction. The friend who mocks your healthy eating habits might feel guilty about their own choices. The family member who questions your career change might be projecting their own regrets about roads not taken. This isn't about excusing bad behavior or accepting unfair treatment. It's about understanding that most judgment says more about the judge than the judged. When you see criticism as information about the other person rather than absolute truth about yourself, you can process it without taking it personally. Marcus Aurelius was masterful at this. He wrote, "Whenever you want to cheer yourself, consider the good qualities of your companions. For instance, the energy of one, the modesty of another, the generosity of a third, and so forth. For nothing cheers the heart so much as the examples of the virtues, when they are exhibited in the morals of those who live with us." Notice that he focused on finding the good in people, even when they might have been critical of him. This wasn't naive optimism. It was strategic, emotional management. By choosing to see people's positive qualities, he protected himself from being negatively affected by their limitations. But let's go even deeper into the psychology of judgment. Why are some people's opinions more triggering than others? Why does criticism from certain people hit harder than identical criticism from others? The Stoics understood that this reveals something important about your own psychology. Usually, the opinions that bother us most are the ones that trigger our deepest fears about ourselves. If someone calls you lazy and it ruins your day, ask yourself, do you secretly worry that you might be lazy? If someone questions your intelligence and you can't stop thinking about it, do you have underlying doubts about your own intellectual abilities? The people whose opinions affect us most are often those who voice our own inner critic. They're saying out loud what we've been saying to ourselves in private. This is why the same criticism can roll off one person's back while completely devastating another person. It's not about the criticism itself. It's about how it resonates with your existing self-doubts. Epictetus taught that this is actually a gift, though it doesn't feel like one. When someone's opinion triggers a strong emotional reaction, they're showing you where you still have work to do on yourself. They're revealing insecurities that you might not have been consciously aware of. Instead of getting angry at them for pointing out your weak spots, you can thank them for the free therapy session. They've shown you exactly what you need to work on to become more emotionally resilient. This is the Stoic practice of turning obstacles into opportunities. Let me give you a personal example. Early in my career, someone criticized my speaking style, saying I was too intense and overwhelming. This bothered me for weeks. I kept replaying the comment, feeling hurt and defensive. But when I applied Stoic analysis, I realized why it stung so much. I was insecure about whether I was communicating effectively. Instead of dismissing their feedback or wallowing in hurt feelings, I used it as data. I asked other people I trusted for honest feedback about my communication style. I worked on varying my pace and energy level. I became a better speaker because I treated the criticism as information rather than an attack. The key insight is this: secure people don't get rattled by others' opinions because they know who they are. Insecure people get devastated by criticism because it confirms their worst fears about themselves. The goal isn't to become arrogant or closed to feedback. It's to become so secure in your own assessment of yourself that external opinions can't destabilize you. This brings us to one of the most powerful Stoic concepts: the internal versus external scorecard. Warren Buffett, though not a Stoic philosopher, captured this idea perfectly when he said, "The big question about how people behave is whether they've got an inner scorecard or an outer scorecard. It helps if you can be satisfied with an inner scorecard. Most people live by an external scorecard. They measure their worth by others' reactions, likes on social media, applause after presentations, approval from authority figures, acceptance from peer groups. This makes them incredibly vulnerable because their self-worth depends on factors outside their control. Stoics live by an internal scorecard. They measure their worth by their own standards. Did I act with integrity? Did I do my best with the information I had? Did I treat others fairly? Did I stay true to my values under pressure? These are questions only you can answer, and the answers don't depend on anyone else's opinion. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this perfectly during his reign. He made decisions that were deeply unpopular with various groups, refusing to persecute Christians when it was politically expedient, spending his own wealth on public works instead of personal luxuries, choosing his successor based on merit rather than family connections. He faced criticism from senators, generals, and citizens, but his internal scorecard told him he was doing what was right, so he persevered. This is true leadership, making decisions based on principle rather than popularity. And it's true freedom, living according to your own conscience rather than the crowd's expectations. But developing an internal scorecard requires brutal honesty with yourself. You can't just declare that you don't care what others think and magically become indifferent. You have to do the hard work of figuring out what you actually believe, what you actually value, and what standards you want to hold yourself to. The Stoics had a practice for this called the evening review. Every night they would examine their day. What did I do well? What could I have done better? Where did I act according to my values, and where did I fall short? This wasn't self-flagellation, it was self-improvement through honest self-assessment. Seneca wrote about this practice extensively. When the light has been removed, and my wife has fallen silent, I examine the whole day and go over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. For why should I fear any consequence from my mistakes when I'm able to say, watch out that you don't do it again, but now I forgive you? Notice that he's not asking, what did others think of my actions? He's asking, what do I think of my actions? He's evaluating himself by his own standards, not by external reactions. This is how you develop an unshakable sense of self-worth. The evening review also helps you distinguish between valid criticism and invalid criticism. When you're honest about your own performance, you can recognize when feedback is accurate and helpful versus when it's unfair or ignorant. If you know you gave your best effort and acted with good intentions, then criticism stings less because you know it's not entirely accurate. But what about those situations where you genuinely did make a mistake? What if the criticism is valid? This is where many people get stuck. They think that accepting criticism means accepting shame, that acknowledging errors means accepting identity attacks. The Stoics had a radically different approach. They welcomed valid criticism because it helped them improve. They separated their actions from their identity, their mistakes from their worth as human beings. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me, I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone." This is intellectual humility at its finest. He's not defensive about being wrong because being wrong doesn't threaten his fundamental sense of self. He knows that making mistakes is part of being human, and learning from mistakes is part of wisdom. When you truly internalize this, criticism becomes a gift rather than a threat. Someone pointing out your error is helping you become better. Someone showing you a blind spot is expanding your awareness. Someone challenging your assumptions is strengthening your thinking. But here's the crucial distinction. You can accept that you made a mistake without accepting that you are a mistake. You can acknowledge that your performance was poor without accepting that you are a poor person. You can admit that your idea was flawed without accepting that you are a flawed human being. This separation between behavior and identity is perhaps the most psychologically liberating concept in all of Stoicism. Your worth as a human being is not determined by your performance, your achievements, your mistakes, or anyone else's opinion of these things. Your worth is intrinsic, given non-negotiable. Epictetus, remember, was a slave. By society's standards, he was literally worthless property to be bought and sold. But he knew that his true worth had nothing to do with his social status, his wealth, his freedom, or anyone's opinion of him. His worth came from his capacity to reason, to choose, to act with virtue regardless of circumstances. This is why he could say with complete confidence, "No one can hurt you without your permission," not because bad things won't happen to you, but because your core self, your ability to think, choose, and maintain your character can never be touched by external circumstances or other people's actions. Let's apply this to modern life. Your boss might criticize your project, but that doesn't make you a failure as a person. Your relationship might end, but that doesn't make you unlovable. Your business might fail, but that doesn't make you worthless. Other people might disapprove of your choices, but that doesn't make you wrong to have made them. The event is just the event. Your interpretation of what it means about you is where the suffering comes from, and that interpretation is completely within your control. This brings us to one of the most practical aspects of Stoic philosophy, learning to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. The Stoics were among the first to recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. When someone criticizes you and you notice the thought, "I'm a failure," arising in your mind, You don't have to accept that thought as truth. You can observe it with curiosity. Interesting. I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. I wonder where that comes from. This creates distance between you and the thought, reducing its emotional impact. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. His meditations are full of him observing his own mental patterns. Remember that very little disturbs the happy progress of your life except your own thoughts. He was watching his mind react to external events and choosing not to be dragged down by those reactions. This is what psychologists now call cognitive diffusion, the ability to step back from your thoughts and see them as mental events rather than absolute truths. It's incredibly liberating because it means you're no longer at the mercy of every random thought that pops into your head. When someone's opinion triggers the thought, "Everyone thinks I'm stupid," you can observe that thought and ask, "Is this actually true? Do I have evidence for this? Is this thought helping me or hurting me? What would I tell a friend who was thinking this about themselves?" Usually, when you examine these thoughts rationally, you realize they're grossly exaggerated, based on limited evidence, and completely unhelpful. You can choose to let them go and focus on thoughts that are more accurate and constructive. But let's address another common objection. If I stop caring what others think, won't I become selfish and inconsiderate? This misunderstands what Stoics mean by not caring about others' opinions. They're not advocating for being rude, inconsiderate, or socially oblivious. The Stoics cared deeply about treating others well. They believed in justice, kindness, and contributing to the common good. But they didn't derive their sense of worth from others' approval, and they didn't compromise their principles to avoid disapproval. There's a huge difference between being considerate and being controlled. You can be polite, respectful, and helpful without needing constant validation. You can care about others' well-being without being enslaved by their opinions of you. In fact, when you're not desperately seeking approval, you're often more genuinely helpful because your kindness isn't motivated by what you'll get in return. You're free to act from authentic generosity, rather than manipulative people-pleasing. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this. He was known for his fairness, generosity, and concern for his subjects' welfare. But he didn't make decisions based on what would make him popular. He made decisions based on what he believed was right, then accepted whatever reactions followed. This is mature social behavior, considering others' needs and perspectives while maintaining your own boundaries and principles. You listen to feedback, but you don't let it override your own judgment. You aim to be helpful, but you don't sacrifice your authentic self to avoid conflict. The Stoics also understood that trying to please everyone is not only impossible but counterproductive. When you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone. Your attempts to avoid all criticism usually result in bland, forgettable interactions that satisfy no one. People respect authenticity, even when they disagree with it. They can sense when someone is being genuine versus when someone is performing for approval. Paradoxically, the less you need their approval, the more likely you are to earn their respect. This is especially important in leadership positions. Leaders who constantly seek approval make weak decisions because they're trying to minimize criticism rather than maximize results. They compromise their vision to avoid controversy, and they end up achieving mediocrity. Great leaders throughout history were often unpopular in their time because they were willing to make hard decisions that served long-term interests rather than short-term approval. They understood that leadership sometimes requires disappointing people in the service of higher principles. Abraham Lincoln faced enormous criticism for his handling of the Civil War and his stance on slavery. Winston Churchill was widely mocked for his warnings about Nazi Germany. Steve Jobs was criticized for his demanding leadership style, but they all prioritized their mission over their popularity. This doesn't mean being deliberately contrarian or ignoring all feedback. It means having the courage to do what you believe is right, even when it's unpopular. It means being willing to be misunderstood in the short term for the sake of long-term integrity. But let's get even more practical. How do you actually implement these ideas in daily life? How do you break decades of conditioning that makes you automatically seek approval and fear criticism? The Stoics believed in gradual training, what they called spiritual exercises. You don't become emotionally free overnight. You build it like a muscle through consistent practice. Start small. The next time someone makes a minor criticism or gives you a disapproving look, practice the Stoic response. This person's opinion is not up to me. I cannot control what they think. I can only control my response to their thinking. Notice how this changes your emotional reaction. Practice the "so what" test. When you catch yourself worrying about someone's opinion, ask, "So what if they think that about me? What would actually happen?" Usually, you'll realize that the consequences you're imagining are either unlikely or not as catastrophic as you thought. Experiment with small acts of authenticity. Share an opinion you usually keep to yourself. Dress the way you want to dress, rather than the way you think others expect. Pursue a hobby that others might find weird. Start with low-stakes situations where the worst-case scenario is mild disapproval. Notice that the world doesn't end when someone disagrees with you or thinks you're strange. In fact, you might find that your authenticity attracts the right kind of people while repelling the wrong kind. This is actually a good thing because it helps you build relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than fake conformity. Practice the reverse golden rule. Treat others' opinions of you the way you'd want them to treat your opinions of them. In other words, don't give their casual judgments more weight than they deserve, just as you wouldn't want them to be devastated by your casual thoughts about them. When you really think about it, most of your opinions about other people are superficial, uninformed, and changeable. You form impressions based on limited information, and these impressions often turn out to be wrong when you get to know someone better. Why should you assume that others' opinions of you are any more accurate or permanent? This realization can be incredibly liberating. The person whose approval you're desperately seeking probably isn't thinking about you as much as you think they are. They're dealing with their own insecurities, problems, and preoccupations. Your life is not the center of their universe, and their opinion of you is probably not as firm or important as you imagine. The Stoics had a practice of imagining themselves as actors in a play. The role you're assigned might be popular or unpopular, but your job is to play it well, not to rewrite the script to make everyone like your character. Sometimes you're cast as the hero, sometimes as the villain, sometimes as comic relief. Your worth as an actor doesn't depend on the role. It depends on how skillfully you perform whatever part you're given. In life, sometimes circumstances cast you in unpopular roles. You might have to be the boss who makes tough decisions, the friend who tells hard truths, the family member who breaks tradition, the person who stands up for unpopular principles. Your job is to play these roles with integrity, not to change roles to win applause. Seneca captured this beautifully. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. The end of your addiction to approval is the beginning of your authentic life. The death of your people-pleasing persona is the birth of your true character. But what about social media? This is where the ancient wisdom of Stoicism becomes incredibly relevant to modern challenges. Social media amplifies our natural tendency to seek approval and fear judgment by making both immediate and quantifiable. Likes, comments, shares, followers, these become external scorecard metrics that can dominate our thinking. The Stoic approach to social media is to use it as a tool rather than a validation machine. Post what's authentic to you, what serves your genuine goals, what contributes value to others. But don't check compulsively for reactions. Don't derive your mood from engagement metrics, and don't modify your authentic voice to chase algorithmic approval. Remember that social media reactions are even less meaningful than real-world opinions because they're often from people who don't know you at all. Getting upset about negative comments from strangers is like getting upset about the weather in a city you've never visited. It has no bearing on your actual life. The Stoics would probably find our social media anxiety amusing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Remember that very little disturbs the happy progress of your life, except your own thoughts about indifferent things." He couldn't have imagined a platform that turns other people's thoughts about indifferent things into a constant stream of potential disturbance. But his wisdom still applies. The thoughts of strangers on the internet about your posts are the definition of indifferent things. They don't change your character, your relationships, your goals, or your actual circumstances. They're just noise, and you can choose not to let noise disturb your peace. This doesn't mean being insensitive to feedback or never adjusting your communication style. If multiple people you trust tell you that something you posted was unclear or offensive, that's valuable information. But random criticism from people who don't know you and aren't aligned with your values? That's just digital weather sometimes. Stormy, sometimes calm, but not something you can control or should take personally. The Stoics also understood the difference between reputation and character. Reputation is what others think of you. Character is who you actually are. Reputation is external and largely beyond your control. Character is internal and completely within your control. You should care about your character because it determines the quality of your life and relationships. You should be relatively indifferent to your reputation because it's based on incomplete information, subject to misinterpretation, and often says more about the observers than about you. This doesn't mean being careless about your reputation. In practical terms, reputation can affect opportunities and relationships. But it means not sacrificing character for reputation, not compromising your authentic self to manage others' perceptions. Abraham Lincoln supposedly said, "Character is like a tree and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. Focus on growing the tree and let the shadow fall where it may." The Stoics believed that a person of good character will eventually earn a good reputation among people whose opinions matter. Those who judge superficially or unfairly reveal more about themselves than about you. The people worth impressing are usually those who look deeper than surface appearances. But even this shouldn't be your primary motivation. The primary motivation should be the satisfaction of living according to your own highest standards regardless of recognition. The Stoics found deep fulfillment in virtue for its own sake, not for the reputation it might bring. Marcus Aurelius wrote many of his most profound thoughts in a private journal never intended for publication. He wasn't writing to impress others or build his reputation as a philosopher. He was working on his character for the sake of his character, finding meaning in the work itself rather than in others' approval of the work. This is the highest level of freedom, doing what's right because it's right, not because it will be praised. Living authentically because authenticity aligns with your values, not because it will win approval. Pursuing your goals because they matter to you, not because others will be impressed. When you reach this level, criticism and praise affect you about equally, which is to say, very little. You can listen to both with curiosity and equanimity, extracting any useful information while remaining anchored in your own assessment of your thoughts and actions. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive aspects of Stoic wisdom. The people who are most indifferent to others' opinions often end up being the most influential and admired. When you're not performing for approval, your natural charisma and authenticity shine through. When you're not afraid of criticism, you're free to take risks and express bold ideas. Think about the people you most admire, either personally or historically. Chances are they're people who lived according to their own convictions rather than popular opinion. They might have faced criticism, rejection, even persecution, but they stayed true to their vision and values. This is what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, wanting what you get rather than getting what you want. Instead of wanting everyone's approval, which you'll never get, want the approval of your own conscience, which you can always earn. Instead of wanting to avoid all criticism, which is impossible, want the strength to handle criticism with grace, which is completely achievable. The irony is that when you stop needing everyone to like you, you become more likable. When you stop performing for approval, you become more genuinely attractive. When you stop being controlled by others' opinions, you become the kind of person whose opinion others seek. But remember, even this shouldn't become a new form of people-pleasing. The goal isn't to become indifferent to others' opinions so that more people will like you. The goal is to become indifferent to others' opinions so that you can live authentically, pursue meaningful goals, and find inner peace regardless of external reactions. Seneca warned against this trap. It is equally faulty to trust everyone and to trust no one. You don't want to swing from desperately seeking approval to arrogantly dismissing all feedback. The goal is balanced discernment, considering input from credible sources while maintaining emotional independence from all opinions. This balance comes from confidence in your own judgment, which develops through practice and reflection. The more you make decisions based on your own reasoning and see the results, the more you trust your ability to navigate life without constant external validation. The Stoics believed that this confidence should be based on reason, not ego. It's not, I'm always right and everyone else is wrong. It's, I've thought carefully about this decision based on the information available to me and my best understanding of my values and goals. I'm prepared to adjust if I receive better information, but I won't be swayed by emotions or social pressure. This is mature decision-making. Confident but not rigid. Open to input but not dependent on approval. It's the kind of thinking that leads to good long-term outcomes because it's based on principle rather than reaction. As we near the end of our exploration, let me share what might be the most important insight of all. The freedom from others' opinions isn't just about feeling better. It's about living fully. When you're not controlled by the fear of judgment, you can take risks, express creativity, build meaningful relationships, and pursue ambitious goals. Most people live their entire lives in a psychological prison, and they don't even realize the door is unlocked. They're so busy performing for an audience that doesn't really care, seeking approval from people whose opinions don't matter, and avoiding judgment from those who lack the wisdom to judge fairly. They sacrifice their dreams, their authenticity, their potential, all for the illusion of social safety. But you don't have to be most people. You can choose freedom. You can choose to live by your own standards, pursue your own goals, and find peace in your own conscience. This choice is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of your past conditioning or current circumstances. The Stoics understood that this freedom isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. When you stop being controlled by others' opinions, you become dangerous to systems that depend on conformity. You become immune to manipulation through shame, fear, or social pressure. You become a person who cannot be bought, controlled, or silenced by the threat of disapproval. This is why authoritarian systems always try to control public opinion and social pressure. They know that people who are truly free from the need for approval cannot be easily dominated. The person who would rather be right than popular, who would rather be authentic than accepted, who would rather pursue truth than win, praise this person as a threat to any system based on control rather than merit. Cato the Younger understood this. When Julius Caesar was consolidating power and most senators were either supporting him or staying silent out of fear, Cato stood up and spoke against him. He knew it would make him unpopular, knew it might cost him his career, knew it could even cost him his life. But he also knew that someone had to speak for principle, regardless of consequences. Caesar himself reportedly said that he feared Cato more than any general with 10 legions because Cato could not be bought, threatened, or swayed by popular opinion. Cato's moral authority came from his complete indifference to external validation. He was free in a way that even Caesar, with all his power, could never be. This is the political dimension of Stoic philosophy. When individuals are free from the tyranny of opinion, they become capable of genuine leadership, principled resistance, and moral courage. They can see clearly because their vision isn't clouded by the fear of disapproval. But let's bring this back to your daily life. Maybe you're not facing down dictators, but you're facing down the smaller tyrannies of social conformity. The pressure to stay in a job that crushes your soul because others expect stability. The pressure to maintain relationships that drain your energy because others value tradition. The pressure to hide your ambitions because others might call you arrogant. The pressure to dim your light because others feel threatened by brightness. All of these pressures are forms of control, and they all depend on your fear of judgment. The moment you become truly indifferent to others' opinions, these pressures lose their power over you. You become free to make choices based on what actually serves your highest good and the good of those you genuinely care about. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or antagonistic. The Stoics were deeply engaged with their communities and committed to the common good. But they engaged on their own terms from a place of strength rather than neediness, from principle rather than pressure. Marcus Aurelius was emperor, the ultimate people-pleasing job. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone had opinions about his decisions. Everyone was watching and judging his every move. But he remained centered by remembering what was truly up to him and what wasn't. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of? if I'm going to do what I was born, for the things I was brought into the world to do. He found meaning in fulfilling his role excellently, not in winning universal approval for how he fulfilled it. This is the key insight. You can't control whether people approve of your performance, but you can control the quality of your performance. You can't control whether others appreciate your efforts, but you can control whether you give your best effort. You can't control whether people understand your decisions, but you can control whether your decisions align with your values. When you focus entirely on what's within your control, you naturally become less concerned with what others think because you're too busy doing what matters. It's like the difference between a professional athlete who's focused on playing their best game versus an amateur who's constantly looking into the stands to see if people are impressed. The professional might be aware of the crowd, might even draw energy from their support, but their attention is primarily on the game itself. They know that if they play well, appreciation will follow. But if they focus on appreciation instead of performance, both will suffer. This is how to approach life, as a professional rather than an amateur. Professionals do the work for its own sake, constantly improving their craft, measuring themselves against their own standards of excellence. Amateurs do the work for recognition, constantly seeking validation, measuring themselves against others' reactions. The professional mindset naturally leads to better results because it's focused on the fundamentals rather than the superficial. And better results, over time, tend to earn genuine respect from people whose opinions actually matter. But by then, you're less attached to that respect because you've found deeper satisfaction in the work itself. Seneca exemplified this professional approach to life. He was one of Rome's wealthiest and most powerful men, but he viewed his wealth and power as tools for virtue rather than sources of validation. He wrote extensively about the proper use of wealth, the responsibilities of power, and the importance of maintaining perspective regardless of external circumstances. When Nero, the emperor he had tutored and advised, turned against him and ordered his suicide, Seneca faced death with the same equanimity he had shown in life. He wasn't devastated by the loss of imperial favor because his sense of worth had never depended on it. He had lived as a philosopher first, advisor second, and he died as a philosopher true to his principles regardless of consequences. This is the ultimate test of freedom from others' opinions. How you handle extreme disapproval, rejection, or persecution. It's easy to claim indifference when everyone likes you. The real test comes when facing serious criticism, social ostracism, or even physical danger for your beliefs and choices. The Stoics prepared for this test through what they called negative visualization, imagining loss, criticism, and worst-case scenarios in advance. This wasn't pessimism, it was preparation. By mentally rehearsing how they would handle extreme disapproval, they became less afraid of ordinary criticism. Try this exercise. Imagine the worst thing someone could say about you publicly. Imagine it being broadcast to everyone you know. Imagine it being partly true, even. How would you respond? Would you be devastated? Or would you be able to maintain your center? If the thought of public criticism terrifies you, that's information about where you're still vulnerable to others' opinions. Use this as motivation to work on your emotional independence. Practice seeing criticism as information rather than identity attack. Practice separating your worth from your performance. Practice finding validation from internal sources rather than external ones. The goal isn't to become completely immune to all social feedback that would be psychologically unhealthy and practically unwise. The goal is to become selectively sensitive, deeply caring about feedback from people you respect while remaining indifferent to criticism from people whose opinions don't matter. But how do you determine whose opinions matter? The Stoics had clear criteria. The opinions that matter come from people who know you well, who share your values, who have expertise relevant to the topic, and who offer feedback with good intentions. Everyone else's opinions are just noise. Your mentor's critique of your work matters because they have expertise and want you to succeed. A stranger's random insult on the internet doesn't matter because they lack context and probably don't have good intentions. Your close friend's concern about your relationship matters because they know you and care about your well-being. A casual acquaintance's judgment about your lifestyle choices doesn't matter because they don't understand your circumstances or goals. Learning to filter feedback this way is a crucial life skill. It allows you to stay open to genuine guidance while protecting yourself from destructive criticism. It's the difference between being wisely selective and being defensively closed off. The Stoics also understood that even well-intentioned feedback isn't always accurate or helpful. People's advice is colored by their own experiences, biases, and limitations. What worked for them might not work for you. What they fear might not be worth fearing. What they value might not align with your values. This is why the ultimate authority in your life must be your own reasoned judgment. You can gather input from trusted sources, but you must synthesize that input through your own thinking and decision-making process. No one else can live your life for you, so no one else should be making your major decisions for you. Epictetus taught his students to be like skilled physicians who consider various symptoms and treatments, but ultimately make their own diagnosis and treatment plan. You can consult with others, but you're the doctor of your own life, and the final decisions must be yours. This level of personal responsibility can feel overwhelming at first. It's much easier to let others make decisions for you, to follow the crowd, to do what's expected rather than what you believe is right. But this easier path leads to regret, resentment, and a sense of having lived someone else's life instead of your own. The Stoics believed that this personal responsibility was not just a necessity but a privilege. You have been given the incredible gift of rational consciousness, the ability to think, choose, and create meaning. To surrender this gift to others' opinions is to waste the most precious thing you possess. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this constantly. Confine yourself to the present. He meant that instead of worrying about what others might think about your past or future, focus on making the best possible choices in this moment, based on your current understanding and values. The present moment is the only place where you have any actual power. You can't change the past, including past judgments others have made about you. You can't control the future, including future opinions others might form, but you can control your current thoughts, choices, and actions. When you're fully present to your own experience, others' opinions naturally fade into the background. You're too engaged with the reality of your life to be distracted by the commentary about your life. You're living your story rather than managing others' interpretations of your story. This presence-focused approach is especially powerful in social situations where you might normally feel anxious about others' judgments. Instead of monitoring others' reactions to you, you focus on your own experience. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What do I want to contribute to this conversation? How can I be genuinely helpful or interesting? This shift in attention changes everything. Instead of being a nervous performer seeking approval, you become a genuine participant sharing your authentic self. People sense this difference immediately. Authenticity is magnetic in a way that performance never is. The paradox is that when you stop trying to make people like you, you often become more likable. When you stop performing for approval, you start connecting for real. When you stop hiding your true self to avoid judgment, you start attracting people who appreciate your true self. But remember, even this improved social response shouldn't become your new motivation. The goal isn't to become indifferent to others' opinions so that they'll like you more. The goal is to become indifferent to others' opinions so that you can live authentically, regardless of their response. Some people will like your authentic self, others won't, and that's perfectly fine. The people who don't appreciate authenticity are probably not the people you want close relationships with anyway. Your indifference to their disapproval is actually a filtering mechanism that helps you find your tribe. The Stoics called this selective affinity, the natural tendency of like-minded people to find each other when they're being genuine rather than performing. When you're pretending to be someone you're not, you attract people who like your fake persona, leading to shallow relationships built on false foundations. When you're being authentically yourself, you attract people who genuinely appreciate who you are, leading to deeper relationships built on truth and mutual understanding. It's much better to be genuinely liked by a few people than to be superficially liked by many. This principle applies to all areas of life: career, friendship, romance, creative expression. In each domain, authenticity acts as a natural selection pressure that helps you find the right opportunities and relationships while filtering out the wrong ones. In your career, for example, trying to be what you think employers want often leads to jobs that don't suit your actual skills and interests. But presenting your authentic capabilities and interests helps you find roles where you can genuinely excel and find satisfaction. In relationships, pretending to be someone you're not might help you attract more dates, but it won't help you find a compatible long-term partner. Only when you're genuine can someone else determine whether they're genuinely compatible with you. The Stoics understood that this authenticity required courage because it meant accepting that not everyone would approve of who you really are. But they also knew that this courage was essential for a fulfilling life, because relationships and opportunities based on false premises are ultimately unsatisfying. Seneca wrote, "It is likely that some troubles will befall us, but it is not a present fact. How often has the unexpected happened? How often has the expected never come to pass?" He was reminding himself that most of the social rejection we fear is imaginary. We suffer more in anticipation than in reality. Most people are too busy worrying about their own problems to spend much time judging yours. Most criticism is less harsh than you imagine it will be. Most rejection is less devastating than you fear it might be. And most approval, when you do receive it, is less satisfying than you hope it will be. This is why the Stoics focused on internal sources of satisfaction rather than external validation. They found joy in the process of living according to their values, regardless of recognition. They found peace in doing their best, with whatever circumstances they faced, regardless of results. They found meaning in contributing to something larger than themselves, regardless of credit. These internal sources of satisfaction are always available to you. No one can take away your ability to act with integrity. No one can prevent you from treating others with kindness. No one can stop you from pursuing knowledge, creating beauty, or working toward meaningful goals. External validation is scarce, unpredictable, and often based on factors beyond your control. Internal validation is abundant, reliable, and completely within your power to create. Which would you rather depend on for your sense of worth and happiness? The Stoics made their choice clear. They built their lives on foundations that couldn't be shaken by others' opinions, economic changes, political upheavals, or any other external circumstances. They found freedom in the one realm, where freedom is actually possible, the realm of their own thoughts, choices, and character. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others' well-being or disconnected from your community. The Stoics were deeply engaged with the world and committed to serving the common good. But they served from a place of inner strength rather than outer neediness, from principle rather than people-pleasing. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire adult life in public service, making decisions that affected millions of people. He cared deeply about the welfare of his subjects and the stability of the empire. But he didn't derive his sense of worth from their approval or disapproval of his decisions. He wrote, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present: I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world?" His motivation came from his sense of duty and purpose, not from the desire for acclaim. This is mature motivation, doing what needs to be done because it needs to be done, not because doing it will win praise. It's the motivation of a parent caring for their child, a teacher educating their students, a doctor treating their patients. The work itself provides the satisfaction. External recognition is just a pleasant bonus. When you operate from this level of internal motivation, you become incredibly effective because your energy goes into the work rather than into managing others' perceptions of the work. You're free to focus on quality, innovation, and impact rather than on publicity, credit, and approval. This focus on substance over perception often leads to better long-term results because substance has lasting value, while perception is temporary and changeable. The person who does excellent work consistently will eventually be recognized, But the person who focuses on recognition while neglecting quality will eventually be exposed. The Stoics had a long-term perspective that helped them stay focused on what really mattered. They knew that trends change, opinions shift, and what's popular today might be scorned tomorrow. But virtue, wisdom, and genuine contribution have enduring value regardless of fashion. Seneca observed, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He understood that social approval often comes and goes in cycles. The person who's celebrated today might be criticized tomorrow, and vice versa. Only character remains constant through these changes. This is why building your life on others' opinions is like building on sand. The foundation constantly shifts, leaving you perpetually insecure. But building your life on your own principles is like building on rock. The foundation remains solid regardless of changing weather. The practical implication is that you should make decisions based on your long-term values rather than short-term social pressures. Ask yourself, will I be proud of this choice in 5 years? Does this align with who I want to become? Will this serve my deepest goals and values? These questions lead to much better decisions than, what will people think? Or, how will this look? Because they're focused on substance rather than appearance, on long-term satisfaction rather than short-term approval. The Stoics also practiced what they called the discipline of action, acting in accordance with virtue regardless of external circumstances or social pressures. This discipline required them to have crystal clear values and the courage to live by those values even when it was difficult or unpopular. What are your core values? Not what you think they should be, not what others expect them to be, but what they actually are when you're honest with yourself. These values should guide your decisions more than social approval because they represent your authentic self rather than your performed self. Living according to your values requires constant choices, some small and some large. Do you speak up when someone says something you disagree with? Or do you stay silent to avoid conflict? Do you pursue the career that genuinely interests you? Or do you choose the one that will impress others? Do you express your creativity? Or do you hide it to avoid criticism? These choices accumulate over time to create either an authentic life or a performed life. The authentic life might face more criticism in the short term, but leads to deeper satisfaction in the long term. The performed life might win more approval initially, but ultimately feels empty because it's not really yours. The Stoics believed that this authenticity was not just personally fulfilling, but socially beneficial. When people live according to their genuine nature and values, they contribute their unique gifts to the world. When they live according to others' expectations, they suppress their potential contributions. Think about the people who have had the greatest positive impact on the world. Almost all of them faced significant criticism and opposition because they were doing something new, challenging conventional wisdom, or standing up for unpopular principles. If they had been controlled by others' opinions, they never would have made their contributions. This is the social dimension of personal freedom. When you're free from the tyranny of others' opinions, you're free to contribute your unique gifts, challenge harmful norms, and help move society forward. Your personal liberation becomes a gift to everyone who benefits from your authentic contributions. But what about those times when you genuinely make mistakes? When the criticism is accurate and deserved? The Stoic approach here is particularly wise. Accept the valid feedback, learn from the error, make amends if necessary, and then move forward without dwelling in shame or defensiveness. Mistakes don't define you unless you let them. Every error is an opportunity to grow, to understand yourself better, to refine your judgment, and improve your character. The person who never makes mistakes is either not taking any risks or not being honest about their failures. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confess your faults. When you have committed a wrong action, do not be afraid to say to yourself, 'I have made a mistake.' When you have spoken wrongly, say to yourself, 'I spoke wrongly.' When you think you have handled a situation badly, say to yourself, 'I handled that badly.'" This radical honesty about your own performance is liberating because it frees you from the exhausting work of maintaining a perfect image. You can acknowledge mistakes quickly, learn from them efficiently, and move forward without being haunted by shame or the fear of being found out. When you're comfortable with your own imperfection, others' criticism of your imperfections loses its sting. You can say, "You're absolutely right, I did handle that poorly. Thanks for pointing it out. Here's how I plan to do better next time." This response often disarms critics and earns respect because it shows maturity and growth mindset. The person who can admit mistakes without losing their sense of worth is incredibly powerful because they're not controlled by the fear of being wrong. They're free to take risks, try new approaches, and push boundaries because they know that failure is information, not identity. This is perhaps the deepest level of freedom from others' opinions. Being so secure in your own worth that you can acknowledge your limitations without feeling diminished. You know that making mistakes doesn't make you a mistake, that being wrong about something doesn't make you wrong as a person. The Stoics cultivated this security through their understanding of human nature. They knew that every person is flawed, that error is part of the human condition, that growth requires the willingness to be temporarily incompetent at new things. This understanding made them compassionate toward their own limitations and others. When you truly accept your own humanity, including your capacity for error, ignorance, and poor judgment, you become much less defensive about criticism and much more open to learning. You can receive feedback with curiosity rather than defensiveness because you're not trying to maintain an image of perfection. This openness to learning, paradoxically, makes you more competent over time because you're constantly improving rather than constantly defending. The person who can say, "I don't know," when they don't know, and "I was wrong" when they were wrong, learns faster than the person who pretends to know everything. The Stoics saw this continuous learning as one of life's greatest pleasures. They were genuinely excited about discovering their own errors because each error revealed was an opportunity for improvement. They were grateful for honest feedback because it helped them see their blind spots. Seneca wrote, "The willing destiny guides them. The unwilling destiny drags them." He understood that we all face challenges, criticism, and setbacks. The question is whether we meet them with openness and grace or with resistance and bitterness. When you're willing to learn from whatever life brings, including criticism and failure, you become an active participant in your own development rather than a passive victim of circumstances. You transform obstacles into stepping stones, critics into teachers, and setbacks into setups for comebacks. This willing engagement with difficulty is what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but embracing it as necessary for your growth and development. This doesn't mean being masochistic or seeking out suffering, but it means finding value and meaning in whatever experiences you encounter. When someone criticizes you unfairly, you can think, "This is teaching me patience and helping me practice not being controlled by others' opinions." When someone criticizes you fairly, you can think, "This is showing me where I can improve and helping me become better." In both cases, the criticism serves your development rather than threatening your ego. This reframing is incredibly powerful because it puts you back in control of your experience. Instead of being a victim of others' judgments, you become a student learning from every interaction. Instead of needing to defend yourself against criticism, you can mine it for useful information while discarding what doesn't serve you. The ultimate goal of all these practices is what the Stoics called ataraxia, tranquility of mind. This isn't numbness or indifference to everything. It's the peaceful confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes your way. It's the deep calm of someone who has found their center and can't be knocked off balance by external turbulence. This tranquility doesn't mean you stop caring about anything. You still care deeply about your values, your relationships, your goals, and your contributions. But you stop caring about things that are ultimately beyond your control, including others' opinions of your caring. Marcus Aurelius described this state beautifully. Receive without pride. Let go without attachment. You can enjoy praise when it comes without needing it for your self-worth. You can face criticism when it comes without being devastated by it. You hold both lightly because your sense of self is anchored in something deeper. This deeper anchor is your relationship with yourself, your understanding of your own values, your acceptance of your own humanity, your commitment to your own growth. When this relationship is strong, External relationships can be sources of joy and learning rather than sources of anxiety and validation seeking. The person who likes themselves doesn't need everyone else to like them. The person who respects themselves doesn't need everyone else's respect. The person who trusts their own judgment doesn't need everyone else's approval of their decisions. This self-reliance isn't arrogance, it's maturity. It's the difference between a child who needs constant reassurance and an adult who can navigate uncertainty with confidence. It's the difference between a student who always needs to know if they're doing it right and a master who trusts their own assessment of their work. Developing this inner strength takes time and practice, but every step toward it increases your freedom and effectiveness. Every time you choose your own opinion over popular opinion, you strengthen your psychological independence. Every time you do what you believe is right despite social pressure, you build your integrity muscle. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. You don't need to transform overnight into a completely independent person. Just take the next small step toward living more authentically, speaking more honestly, choosing more courageously. Maybe that step is sharing an opinion you usually keep to yourself. Maybe it's pursuing a hobby that others might find strange. Maybe it's setting a boundary with someone who's been taking advantage of your people-pleasing tendencies. Maybe it's simply noticing when you're performing for approval instead of acting from authenticity. Each small step builds momentum toward greater freedom. Each choice to prioritize your inner compass over external pressure makes the next choice easier. Each experience of surviving disapproval and discovering that it's not as devastating as you feared increases your confidence. The Stoics believed that this journey toward inner freedom was the most important work a human being could do. They saw it as a moral imperative, not just a personal preference. Free people create free societies. Authentic people inspire others to be authentic. Courageous people make courage possible for others. Your personal liberation from the tyranny of others' opinions isn't just about you. It's about everyone who will be influenced by your example, everyone who will benefit from your authentic contributions, everyone who will be inspired by your courage to be yourself. In a world full of people performing for approval, authenticity stands out like a beacon. In a society pressuring everyone to conform, individual courage gives others permission to be different. In a culture obsessed with external validation, inner-directed people show that there's another way to live. This is your opportunity and your responsibility. You have been given the incredible gift of consciousness, reason, and choice. What will you do with these gifts? Will you spend them seeking approval from people who don't really know you? Will you waste them performing for audiences who don't really care? Will you sacrifice them to avoid criticism from people whose opinions don't really matter? Or will you use them to live fully, love deeply, create boldly, and contribute meaningfully? Will you trust your own judgment, follow your own path, and find satisfaction in your own approval? Will you become the person you're capable of being rather than the person others expect you to be? The choice is yours, and it's available to you right now. You don't need anyone's permission to stop caring what they think. You don't need anyone's approval to start living authentically. You don't need anyone's validation to begin trusting your own judgment. The door to your psychological prison has been unlocked all along. The Stoics are simply pointing it out to you, showing you how to push it open, and inviting you to step into the freedom that has always been your birthright. The only question remaining is, are you ready to walk through that door? Remember Epictetus, who found perfect freedom despite being a slave. Remember Marcus Aurelius, who remained centered despite ruling an empire. Remember Seneca, who stayed philosophical despite losing everything. They proved that external circumstances cannot imprison a free mind. You have everything you need to join their ranks. You have reason to understand your situation. You have choice to change your response. You have values to guide your decisions. You have the present moment to begin practicing your freedom. The world needs more people who are free from the tyranny of others' opinions. It needs more individuals who choose truth over popularity, authenticity over approval, principle over pressure. It needs more people who have the courage to be themselves in a world that's constantly trying to make them something else. Be one of those people. Start today. Start now. Stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, What do I think? Stop wondering, will they approve? And start wondering, do I approve? Stop fearing, what if they judge me? And start embracing, what if I trust myself? This is the Stoic way. This is the path to freedom. This is your invitation to a life lived on your own terms, guided by your own values, and measured by your own standards. The only opinion of you that truly matters is the one you see when you look in the mirror. Make sure it's one you can live with, one you can be proud of, one that reflects who you really are rather than who others want you to be. Your authentic life is waiting. It's time to claim it.